Hey everyone, so welcome to our weekly Bible study where we're going to go over everything we read over the week. And what we read this week was Genesis chapters 1 through 11, Psalm chapter 8, 12, and 1 through 4, and John chapter 1, verses 1 through 3. But first, we have an announcement of a contest.
We are doing a contest. On Facebook, I've just asked everybody to subscribe and then comment done, and for a chance, like their name to be put in the drawing. With y'all, I'm going to ask that you tell me your three all-time favorite shows. I'll give you an example. Mine is The Big Bang Theory, Friends, and The Middle. So if you will leave a comment down below, well, subscribe, of course, first. Leave a comment below of those three favorite TV shows of yours, and I will put your name in the drawing for this set that we're still giving away. It's a yellow set, a yellow bead set. It's very pretty. Has the earrings and the bracelet. All right. And so we will go live on Friday, and we will pick the name of the winner and get that sent to you, or you can come by and pick it up if you live close to me or to us. And I think that's it.
So, on a previous video, Michelle asked the question of, if you could interview someone from the Bible other than God or Jesus, who would it be? Well, we're going to answer that right now. And my answer is Paul. Paul wrote most of the New Testament epistles, and he is some of the most confusing at times. And Peter even says it with, some of the stuff in Paul's letters can be confusing, but people twist it as they twist the other scriptures to their own destruction. And so, Paul, I would love to have learned from him, to see what he meant by certain passages, see if I'm correct on my thinking in certain passages, and also just to learn from his life, how he lived for the Lord, and to figure out what that thorn in his side was. Whether it was blindness, a sin, bad eyesight, not blindness. Something wrong with his hands.
And I don't think it's a sin. Maybe a temptation of a sin.
Or some other physical or mental disability. It would be really cool to know that. What about you?
I kind of go between two different women in the Bible. I mean, Paul is the best sense for a man, but since I'm a woman, I kind of lean towards the women. And so I would say Abigail's my favorite. So yeah, probably Abigail first, because she was married to a drunk, a horrible, horrible person, very selfish, drunkard, and God said, let me take care of that for you. And then she, after his death, became a queen. And I'm not talking a long, long time. This was a matter of, a day or two that God came back and said, yeah. And I'm not saying that he was doing it for Abigail per se, but because she was faithful to him, she is rewarded with being married to David, to King David. So that's, I think, like we've said before, I like the love stories in the Bible. So Abigail goes from somebody who was not very nice to her and was very selfish and struggled probably with addiction. And then she got to become a queen and be married to King David. Also Ruth, because like I said, I love stories, so it's kind of hard to choose, but I know Boaz was probably amazing, and I would love to see that in a Hallmark movie. Mm-hmm. Ruth and Boaz. That whole story played out, because that is an amazing story. A very amazing story of how faithful she was to her mother-in-law and then to the Lord, and how, later down the line, your faithfulness is rewarded because Jesus comes from that line. So that's
that's really awesome.
That's one of my favorite parts of Ruth. All right.
So, since I said we went over Genesis chapter 1 through 11, Psalm chapters 8, 12, and 104, and John chapter 1 through 3, next week, or this week, you can follow along. We're going to be doing Genesis chapters 12 through 29. But today we're going to go over what we read in week 1, which was those previous passages. And so I'm going to summarize it real quick. So basically the gist of it is God creates everything. He creates the universe. He creates the earth. He then takes special time or special... He makes us special. And we're made in His image as men and women, as humans. And so God created us special in His image, and He gave us a special purpose to rule over the world, to be in communion and relationship with Him. And we just missed the boat there. We just completely sin. We listened to the serpent.
Missed the boat's pretty good for the next thing.
Yeah, exactly. So we sin, we listen to the serpent, we blame each other, and we fall, and we deserve punishment, but God, instead of destroying us immediately, just kicks them out of the garden, and gives them, and covers them with the animal hides that He does. And
so He still loves on them and provides for them. He just punishes them.
Yes, ma'am, but He doesn't even give them the fullest punishment. That comes later when they die, and He did promise them that they would die because of that, but it just doesn't have to happen immediately for Him to remain just and keep His word. So He delays it and gives them time because He loves them and He loves us, but just like He gives us time and we don't just die immediately whenever we sin. Lord helps them, and then they have kids, and Cain kills Abel, and then the world gets even worse, so God judges the entire world and punishes people with a flood. And then through that punishment, there's also mercy,
Rainbow,
and redemption of one family who trusted in God, specifically Noah, who builds an ark, makes it through the flood, and God uses Noah to refill the earth. And then God promises to never disrupt the seasons or judge the earth with a flood again. And then after the flood, Noah has a bunch of kids, he has a bunch of descendants. Those descendants refuse to spread out across the world and try to build a Tower of Babel, which is directly against what God said, to be fruitful, multiply, and spread across the earth. And they're also showing arrogance, trying to reach God in the heavens. So God confuses their language, actively judges them by confusing their language, which also makes them do what He said in the first place, because they have to now scatter across the earth because they don't understand each other. So they go with the people who know their language, and then they scatter. So that's where we get the nation scattering. And then what we're going to pick up this week, and what it leaves off last week, which is what I'm summarizing, is Abram. It introduces us to Abram, who God is going to use specifically. And so then the Psalms just go over the beauty of creation, how to use creation language and creation imagery in our prayer and our praise life. And then John chapter 1, verses 1 through 3, sort of go over the echoing imagery of Genesis 1, where it says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. It uses the same phrase, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and nothing was created except created through the Word. So it gives us the divinity of Jesus being there, because the Word is later identified as the Son, which is Jesus. And so we get all of that. That's the big summary. But we also have questions. So what are some of the questions that you have?
Okay. So.
And if you have any questions, comment it down below, and we'll try to answer them too.
Exactly. I know we have the message board at church, and there are some questions on there that I love reading through, and I was talking with Reagan about the one that said, why did God punish or curse Canaan? And I know we discussed that a lot. So I've got questions, lots of questions that I saved for Reagan, because that's why he's going to school, so he can answer all my questions. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm just summarizing the first part. Of course, the creation, day 1 through 6, and then the creation of man and woman in God's image, and then the day 7 to rest. And I think my favorite part of that was that he created them male and female. So 2 genders. So we don't have to be confused. Mm-hmm. There are 2 genders, male and female. So that he covers that in first part. Mm-hmm. Get that out of the way, right? And then we go over, and my question is, and not really a question, I think I've known this, but I do want to confirm it. So it had never rained before then, right?
It doesn't seem to say that, because it says that a mist came from the ground and watered everything. So
I think it had never rained until the floods, and then God opened up the sky, and it began to rain, and opened up the floodgates from the ground, and the water was coming up and coming down. And I feel like from what I've read that it had never done that from the sky.
Which could also be the reason why there was no rainbow, because there was no rain in the sky.
Right. So, and a reason that all those people probably thought Noah was crazy, because they had never seen rain before.
I mean, that, or whether they considered him crazy or not, the Lord had already determined to judge all of them and save only Noah.
Yeah.
So
right, but
they had all,
I just feel like if you're kind of like thinking about the whole story, you're like, I bet they were like, "Oh, he's crazy. Like, how's it gonna flood?" Like, you know. So
I see that.
Anyway, but I wrote there was never any rain yet. It just mist from the ground. So of course we have the tree of life in the middle of the garden, and then the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So once they ate of the one, they had to be cast out of the garden in order to not be able to eat of the other, to have eternal life. So one provided eternal life, and one provided knowledge of good and evil.
Yes.
So they, up until that time, they could eat from the tree of life.
Mm-hmm.
But after that, they couldn't anymore, so they no longer had eternal life.
They couldn't. Yes, ma'am. They wouldn't be immortal, so they would age and they would die. And God's promise is true. He created them, and the option for eternal life with Him was there, but they chose their own way. That's kind of the point of the narrative, and God's teaching us through this historical narrative that we have a choice to be with Him or not, but that's made possible now through Christ Jesus, and that our ancestors originally chose the bad way, to listen to the devil. And so it's also kind of a teaching moment, like, don't make the same mistake as them, choose Jesus, when combined with the New Testament. So
I love that my bookmark is a rainbow too.
It all works together.
I know. So I wore my little rainbow thing for a promise bracelet. And then I realized that my bookmark has rainbows. This is a Noelle Creates bookmark.
Mm-hmm.
So it said the Lord planted a garden in Eden in the east. The east of?
Wherever Moses was writing this. So Moses is traditionally considered the author. There's good reasons to think it was Moses. I can't go over all those, but it would be the east of wherever they were at when he was writing it, because he was writing it for the people.
Several places that I was reading, it was like in the east, in the east, in the east. So I was like, that must be a reason.
Some people will try to figure out places where it was at. Obviously, it's not there anymore, because after he cast them out, there was no one to take care of the garden, and so it was just destroyed in the flood.
I think a lot of people try to figure out where those rivers that the Bible talks about, and they try to figure all that out. And I'm not talking about that.
Well, I wouldn't even try that. Because
isn't there like a show, East of Eden?
I guess.
Or something.
I don't know if you could figure it out, because
those places don't exist anymore.
After the flood, it had dramatic shifts in the geography and the landscape.
Yeah. So, and then, so I just made little comments like, God made man out of the dust and breathed life into him, but he made woman out of the rib of a man. So I like that. That's really cool.
Symbolizes companionship, that they belong to each other. They're supposed to be side by side with one another. It's kind of like a marriage ceremony.
In the Psalm passage, it's talking about Leviathan, and I'd forgotten that was in Psalm. I just remember it in Job.
Mm-hmm.
And Leviathan would be sort of like a sea dinosaur, right?
Giant, some sort of giant sea monster that
like Nessie, kind of.
We don't know.
I don't know. I think it'd probably be even worse than Nessie from some of the stuff that's described in Job.
So they describe it in Job pretty much, but the authors themselves seem to understand what Leviathan is, and the only place it's really described is in Job. Mm-hmm. So it could be dead and extinct now. It could be...
By now, you mean when they're writing Psalms?
No, ma'am. They probably thought it was still alive then. They probably knew, but I mean now, modern times.
Oh, yeah, it's dead now.
It's like,
but I'm just saying that, like, Leviathan and Behemoth were probably dinosaurs in that time that were still alive, maybe?
Maybe? But the biblical writers after Adam and Eve and the flood write about Leviathan, and Job was after the flood.
Well, that's what I'm saying, during that
so
time.
They were
so they probably died
too.
off after that.
Possibly.
Yeah.
It could also be... I don't take this view, but it could be that they understood these creatures to represent chaos, and like the Leviathan living in the water, it would represent the chaotic and dangerous nature of the ocean, and it was just the animal they had that they thought about it, as well as being a real animal. But I think that the ocean imagery. In the beginning, God created heavens and earth. The earth was formless without void, and without shape or is void. It gives the imagery. It's just a giant ball of water, but to the ancient Hebrews, and even somewhat to us too, the ocean was the place of mystery where people went, they died, they just got stuck in the water. It would toss you around. It was just chaos. There's tons of big monsters in it.
It's still mysterious to me. I don't even like being out on it.
Giant fish that can eat you.
We would like to take a cruise, but I'm just like, I don't know about whales and just the deep of the ocean. No, I'm just going to stay right
Even
here. Today,
it's still untamed. It's this chaotic force because we don't even know what's at the bottom of the ocean. We don't control all the wildlife, although we're given dominion over it at creation to gain control and to help steward and take care of it. So there's a lot of stuff there, a lot of imagery, but also a lot of creatures that we just don't have anymore.
Okay, so starting this one, I start having questions. So a lot of questions. All right, so this is day 3 where I start going, I might have to ask Reagan about some of this stuff. Okay, so it says the serpent was the most cunning of all the wild animals that the Lord God had made. Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Were some of the animals cunning? Did they already all talk?
That's good
Eve
questions.
did not seem surprised that a snake was talking to her.
So there are some theories. If it was the devil, then why is it referring to the serpent as
a
created animal along with the others? And especially when Revelations equates the serpent with the devil. So there's a few possibilities. One, that the devil could have been controlling the serpent.
Right.
Just like the angel is thought to have been controlling the donkey to speak to Balaam.
And I get that, but my point is okay, she didn't seem surprised that Satan is talking through this animal and it's talking about how cunning the serpent is. So
the Bible
do
really
the
doesn't...
animals talk back then?
Well, not even that, but Balaam doesn't. It doesn't tell us if Balaam was surprised when his donkey starts talking either.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So the Bible just doesn't mention whether they were surprised or not. And I would think that Balaam, living in ancient Israel where they aren't in the Garden of Eden, and they weren't just created, he knows that animals don't talk. So why is he not acting surprised? I think the Bible just doesn't mention whether they're surprised.
Well, I'm just confused on this. Now the serpent was the most cunning of all the wild animals that the Lord God had made. Mm-hmm. What does that mean?
I mean, you see the serpent being cunning in the story.
Yeah, but he's the most cunning. So that means there were other animals that were cunning.
I mean, a fox is pretty cunning. Ravens and crows are pretty.
So
cunning.
we mean it from an animal kind of.
Yes, I guess that.
Okay, yeah.
But even more so here, I think if we're going to take the idea that the devil was controlling the animal, I think that the idea is that the devil controlled the snake because it was the most cunning out of all the animals. So it makes sense that it would control that.
They are sneaky little things.
There's also the view that the devil took the form of the snake as well. And then there's the view... There's several views. I think it has to, in some way, have been or been controlled by the devil, because Revelation tells us that the serpent is the devil in Revelation from the garden. But then there's other views on how exactly that works. And I think the biggest issue, the biggest thing we need to know, is the devil was in some way connected to that serpent, such that it was the devil doing it, because Revelation tells us that.
Right.
Or that Satan had a commanding control over it, or it was him. But that doesn't seem to fit well with the reference to the fact that this was a serpent created along with the other animals if it just was the devil. Because then it wouldn't have been a being that was created along with the animals. It would have just been the devil that was created along with the angels. So I take the view that the devil was controlling it.
Right. Okay, so then the next thing was just kind of a statement that we kind of all probably learned, but he says to the woman, did God really say you can't eat from any tree in the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, we may eat the fruit from the trees in the garden, but about the fruit of the tree in the middle of the garden, God said, you must not eat it or touch it or you will die. Mm-hmm. So Eve lies.
I don't think she lies.
She just misspoke.
Either that or she added an extra rule to make sure she didn't get near it.
Okay.
Or maybe Adam added that rule because Adam told her this.
Oh, Adam's the one that told her?
Yeah, because God told Adam and then Eve was created. God told Adam first not to touch it.
It tells us that?
Or to not eat it.
It tells us that.
And, well, at least the narrative, it could not always be in chronological order, but the narrative implies God created Adam and
then told him the rules.
Then told him the rules, and then he creates Eve after Adam names all the animals. There's nothing suitable for him, and she obviously learns it from someone. So right. It's either Adam or God,
or she could be lying.
Well, she learned the rules somehow, is what I'm saying.
No, I'm saying she could be just like exaggerating. You see what I'm saying? Like we can't eat it or touch it.
Could be that Adam told her not to touch it too. And she thought God also said that. She could just be mistaken on that. Or they could have added that extra rule knowing, just to try to stay away from it. Which is a pretty decent rule to just not even touch it. Like, if you can't eat it, why would you go touch it anyway? You know?
Okay, so my big question that I've always wondered was, we know Adam was with Eve when Satan was tempting her. Like, I guess the first time I ever read through my Bible, I don't think I realized that he was standing there, that he was there when all this happened. And then I remember when I studied through my Bible, I was like, what? He's there. God tells us he is there. And so I would love to have been there to hear that conversation. Like, did he say anything like, oh, you better not do that? Or did he just stand back and let her do it?
It seems to imply that both of them were already convinced by the serpent. Like, they started listening to the serpent. So he started
listening too,
So, like, it says he's there with her. It says that she takes the fruit, eats of it, and hands some to him, because he's standing next to her. The Bible says that. And, that
well, you know, the first time I read through, I thought she went and found him and gave him some of it. But then the next time I was like, wait just a minute. He is standing there.
Mm-hmm. And so they're both held responsible. Adam more so.
Yeah.
So the serpent is addressed first, because the serpent deceived them. Well, actually, no. Adam is addressed first.
Yeah.
And he says, that woman you gave me, he's blaming God, and the woman, gave me some fruit and I ate. And then, so Adam gets the brunt of the responsibility. So then the woman gets the next responsibility. But the serpent gets cursed last. Serpent gets a big curse, too. The curse of crawling around in the dirt.
But he doesn't get cursed. It's the snake that gets cursed. Is that right?
Yes and no. So I take the crawling around in the dirt not to refer as to a loss of legs, but to refer to the eating the dirt is shameful and dishonorable. So, just like how the snake crawls in the dirt, the devil, who is controlling the snake, is now shamed and dishonored for the rest of eternity.
Okay, that makes better sense. Okay.
Because the devil obviously isn't an animal, so why would you curse it to lose legs? If it was really the devil's fault. And if the devil was taking its form, let's say you take that interpretation, it still wouldn't make sense to curse the devil to no longer have legs, because the devil doesn't have a physical form normally, and he just took on that form to deceive them. So, like, what I think the you will crawl on the dirt for the rest of your days is playing off the fact that snakes normally already do that, but for them, it's a metaphor for just being shameful and dishonorable, and basically being dishonored. So the devil is perpetually dishonorable and perpetually dishonored now, and will always be seen as dishonored. That's why he gets, cast out too. And so that's my thoughts on that. But some people will also say, well, this is just the natural consequences of sin. God didn't curse them actively. It was just the passive. No, the Bible does say that God...
We don't have to have natural consequences from sin. God put those in place too.
Yeah, well, also that. Like, the natural consequences of sin were created into the fabric of creation by God.
Right.
But also he actively curses them. He says, I curse you. He says that to the snake. And he says that once to Eve with the labor pains. And then the rest of them are referred as this will be the way it is now. But the idea is that it's an act of curse from the Lord instead of them dying immediately, which they should have done.
Okay, so my next thing was just something...
Oh, and one more thing. When it says that you will die in the very beginning when he warns them, he says, in the Hebrew it's die. He says it's just die twice, which using it that way twice means you will for sure die.
Right.
It doesn't mean you will die immediately.
Right.
It just means you will for sure die. Right. So Adam and Eve did eventually die, and they didn't somehow...
They could have lived forever in utopia, but they chose sin instead.
And because he said they will for sure die, he couldn't let them stay where they could eat something that would prevent them from for surely dying.
It's really sad that so many people are choosing hell over heaven. Mm-hmm. It's a choice. If you don't make a choice, you make a choice. Yes. And that's what they did. They chose sin over a utopia. And we do that all the time here. Like, we choose sin over Jesus, and it's not going to end well. And even choosing sin, the natural consequences don't end well here either. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so the next thing was sort of a pun. I guess it was a pun, but I love the way that our curses are painful labor.
Oh, you're right. I didn't even think about
and
this.
And then work
is painful labor.
Yeah. So he gave Eve painful labor, and he gave Adam painful labor.
That's really clever. I wonder if that's also in the Hebrew, the way the words work.
I don't know. You've got to look that up.
I got to look that up now.
I just spotted it when I was
writing it out. But in English, that's definitely how that pun works out. I
was like, oh my gosh, I've never noticed that. Let me write that in my Bible, because that is funny. God has such a great sense of humor. But I'm going to tell you, as a woman who has went through childbirth 3 times, that is labor. That is some painful
work. That's a lot of work. Hard.
I'm telling you.
Painful work.
That my first one was tough. Reagan, I ended up having to give myself shots all the time, and that one was tough. But Trey, he almost killed me. There's a lot of body parts I lost. Granted, I could survive without them, but oh my goodness. And then I was so big because I didn't do my, I have gestational diabetes with all my pregnancies. And I didn't do my shots. I opted not to do my metformin or my insulin shots. And so he got so big, we're talking like a 9-pound baby. And I could barely walk. And people would take bets when we would come in, like, when we would go to a restaurant, we would see them betting it, and my oldest son would say, I wonder what they're betting, like 2 twins or like triplets. And they would ask when they came up, like, how many babies are you going to have? I'm like, just one. He's huge. that I can honestly say that about the day before I was scheduled for my C-section, my doctor came, I went to his office and he said, I want you to check in. You look miserable. Just go ahead and check in and get a night of rest. I mean, I told him, I said, you know how people say, I'm so tired, I just wish I would die. I think I know what they're talking about now. I think I know when people are just so exhausted, they're just like, I'm done. Like, I was done. I was so tired. And I had always laughed at people who say, made the joke, get this baby out of me. But I just looked at him and said, you got to get this baby out of me. Like, I can't do this any longer. So I really know the curse of painful labor. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's an amazing blessing afterwards, but I'm going to tell you, it has to be an amazing blessing so you'll forget. It's a trick. So you'll do it again and again and again because, it's awful. So, painful labor and painful labor. So, men got a painful labor and women got a painful labor. All right. Now, and of course we know the angels stood at the east of Eden. Here we go again. With flaming swords so that they couldn't get near that garden. So they couldn't get near the tree of life. I love that, the saying that we always have, am I my brother's keeper? That is from the story of Cain and Abel. And then I just went on to...
the answer to that is yes. God makes that clear by the way he's held accountable. Cain is basically saying, I'm not responsible for my brother.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yes.
And God's like, yes, you are. And in fact, now you're responsible for his death.
Yeah, because he said, he is crying out to me from the ground.
His blood is.
His blood is. I did note that it says people began to call on the Lord at this time.
That's also on my question list.
So I'm just like, were they not talking to the Lord for all those years after they got kicked out of the garden?
So, Cain and Abel are obviously seen presenting sacrifices to the Lord. So it could be that when this genealogy begins,
is when they're talking.
They start falling off, worshiping or caring about the Lord, and then when
they gave birth to Seth.
Because they lived really long. They might have been a long time till Adam and Eve had Seth. And then...
Doesn't it tell us a couple of 100 years?
It might. I can't remember the genealogy. You could flip over and look at it. But
Adam was 130 years old when Seth was born.
How old was he when Cain and Abel were born? That'd give us a time frame.
I don't know.
It doesn't tell us?
It doesn't tell us. But we do know that he was 130 years old when Seth was born, and that's when they began to call on the Lord.
Yeah, because it does connect the calling on the Lord with the name, with Seth. And it could also be the fact that Seth is the one that is promised, like the promise is supposed to go through. Because Cain killed Abel, Abel can't be it now. And Cain can't be it because he's evil. And not only just evil, but like evil to a degree where he was unrepentant and was unwilling to admit his guilt. He just said, oh, this sucks. This is a horrible punishment, God. Please don't let them kill me.
And God didn't. I always wonder about that. Why?
I don't know, because
later he says, if you kill someone...
Then you gotta die.
Yeah, you have to die.
That's after the flood. The death penalty is actually mandated there.
Yeah.
Like, is the general rule. If you kill someone, you also die as the punishment.
So I don't know why God didn't kill him, I guess.
Because there's not many people.
Yeah. He needed to go
and
out.
God shows mercy there because of many reasons. Ultimate judgment, if Cain didn't repent at some point in his life, will always come. So God will be just in his final judgment.
He also said whoever kills Cain will receive vengeance 7 times over. So he really protected him too. So not only did he not kill him, but he protected him.
Yes.
Maybe because we needed more offspring or something.
Very few people, I think.
I guess. But it says that Cain lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden. I swear there's a lot of east of Edens in here.
True. Well, there's also very few people after the flood, so I don't know if that argument works. I I think God is just saying, look, he was just being really merciful to Cain.
Maybe because Adam and Eve were his first creations, he still
could be that
had that soft spot for all of them.
Not necessarily just a soft spot. I mean,
everybody came from Adam and Eve, so yeah.
It could. There's a few. There might be reasons that we don't even know, like that they knew. Obviously, that they're like, oh, Cain can't, or that God definitely knows that Cain can't die for this reason, or maybe God just chose to show mercy at that point, knowing that Cain will eventually get what he deserves in the final judgment if he doesn't repent. But if he does repent,
or because of somebody that's one of
Cain's offspring.
Yeah.
That
still happens to this day. I think there's a lot of times we don't get our punishment, or we don't get this, or we don't, something doesn't happen or does happen because of who we will produce.
Could be that. There's just no way to know for sure, but it is true that there is a mandate, and we're gonna get to that in a little bit after the flood. That murder, if you murder someone, you are to be put to death.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I actually made a note.
And that's before the Mosaic covenant. That's a covenant with all creation. With all the new people of creation, so that's still in effect today.
Okay, so we know Adam died at 930 years old, Seth died at 912 years old, and Enoch was 65 years old when Methuselah was born. And then, of course, this is the first person I noticed that is said to walk with the Lord. So Enoch it was the first to walk with the Lord, and God took him when he was 365 years old. So he didn't die. God just took him up when he was 365 years old. Noah was 500 years old when he fathered Shem, Ham, and how do you say this? Japheth. Methuselah, who's the oldest person to have ever lived. 969 years old. So that was all of that. I love the whole Enoch. And I love that it says that he walked with God, and then that would be Noah's great-grandfather, and then his great-grandson, Noah, is actually said to have walked with the Lord. So he didn't say it about Methuselah or Lamech or whatever his name is, that's Noah's dad. He says it about Noah. So that's so amazing, and that's so wonderful, and that's why Noah was saved, because he walked with the Lord.
Also,
during a very evil time.
He just disappears.
Who?
Enoch just disappears.
Oh, right.
All these other people are said to die.
But
and
Enoch,
it calls back to the sin in the garden where everyone for sure will die. But Enoch gets spared that.
Because he's the first that walks with the Lord.
He's the first to walk with the Lord. But Noah doesn't. He gets spared from judgment.
Right.
Earthly judgment, and he gets to go continue that. But he doesn't just disappear and get taken up. Yeah. So it seems like God has a specific plan for Enoch. And the later Hebrew people thought, well, Enoch's probably going to come back at some point and do something important.
Oh, yeah, they did, didn't they?
And just like Elijah, who was taken up without dying. Their thinking is these people who just didn't die.
But Elijah does come back.
Yeah, Elijah is prophesied to come back, so that's why the Israelites think that Enoch will also do something.
But
important.
he doesn't, does he?
It's not prophesied.
Yeah.
We don't know if he will or not sometime in the future.
Well, I mean,
Elijah
he did it during the biblical times. Okay, so day 4 is where I really start getting so many questions that I even said to you, oh, I got a lot of questions on this one. So, explain the Nephilim.
So the passage...
Because I got Nephilim, sons of God. That's the same thing.
And the mighty men of old.
And powerful... famous man is what my Bible said. Powerful, famous man. What did you just say?
The mighty men of old. It's basically the same thing. They're just saying it differently.
Mighty men of old.
The passage mentions all of these things all together as if the people reading it knew, and they did, what he was talking about. We don't. So we're trying to figure this out. And so some people think the sons of God could be different things. So the sons of God, there's theories that it's the line of Seth. There's theories that it's just other people. There's theories that it was specifically spiritual beings. And because the sons of God is used of spiritual beings in other contexts.
Like angels.
Like Yes, ma'am. Angels.
Like the angels of the Lord.
Angel means messenger, so it would be a spirit. If you're talking about, it could be used on people, but there are spiritual beings that serve as God's messengers as well, as we see. So, if these were angels, then the Nephilim were like hybrid. But the thing is, like, angels don't have they can take on a physical form. So they somehow they were trying to corrupt the line in this theory and produce Nephilim to prevent the promise of the seed, is the idea. Or just to cause chaos in the earth.
Right.
And because,
wickedness, which is what they ended up doing.
They lusted after women too.
They created a lot of wickedness, is what I think.
Or there's the theory that the Nephilim are completely disconnected from the sons of God, because the Nephilim aren't said to have come from the sons of God. They're just mentioned after the sons of God take women.
Well, that's
so
my
if you
question.
read it, the sons of God took these women, the daughters, they were doing this, they chose for themselves. And the Lord said, my spirit will not be with them forever, because they are corrupt. They have 120 years. And then if you count it down, that's the flood. So 120 years pass and the flood happens.
Really?
And so, yes ma'am. It's not actually total lifespan.
Because I wrote 120 years, but I didn't know.
Yeah, so it's
120 years till the flood, till God wipes out the Nephilim?
Until God wipes out everyone, except for Noah. So, I say that because there are people who live past 120 years, even to today. Well, throughout history, and there are people after the flood that live past 120 years. Yes, the lifespan does shrink. I think that's for other reasons, though. The 120 years, I think, is best understood as referring to the amount of time that will pass before the flood.
Right.
And then after all that, it just says the Nephilim were also on the earth, or were on the earth.
In those days and afterwards.
In those days and afterwards.
Meaning after the flood?
That's what it sounds like. And, you got Goliath after. But how did they get on the earth afterwards?
So it says that...
So hold on. How did they get on the earth afterwards, though? Because the sons of God would have had to come... If the theory is the sons of God having children with human women created the Nephilim, then that means the sons of God would have also had to have been... Would have to come back down. Made more. There are some people who think that the Nephilim is just referring to the mighty men. So they're just saying after the flood there were also mighty men. But then there is reference to specific Nephilim after the flood. Like the Israelites say, they use the idea of Nephilim when the scouts come back. They're like the Nephilim. They're huge. They're like
yes.
Yeah. But it's shown that they're sort of exaggerating because Joshua and Caleb were like, no, we can take them.
Goliath was about 9 feet tall.
Yeah, Goliath was huge, and
so we know he's probably one of the offspring.
And then David kills off all of them. Is what it says. So
right.
How did they get back on the world? Because in other sections it says that the spirits that did that with the daughters were chained up for that, and until Judgment Day.
So more came.
So it would have to have been more spirits that had fallen to do that.
These Nephilim...
So there's a lot of questions there, and not a lot of answers. It seems like the people from the time understood way more about this stuff going on. That's why Moses wrote this way to them, under the inspired scripture, obviously. But Moses wrote it, and there's maybe just some things that we weren't. It's not very important that we needed to know, because otherwise I think God would put it in the scripture. There is Nephilim, whatever those are, were in those days. There were also the sons of God that did something with women.
So the Nephilim wasn't the sons of God? Because it always looks like to me that's what they're saying, because it says, the Nephilim were on the earth both in those days and afterward, when the sons of God came to the daughters of mankind. Mm-hmm. So that would be the Nephilim.
Well, they were
bore children to them.
They were on the earth both in those days and afterwards when the sons of God came. So they were on the earth when the sons of God came and had them.
But it says the Nephilim were on the earth both in those days and afterwards when the sons of God came to the daughters of mankind who bore children to them. The sons of God came to the daughters and bore children to them.
Yeah, so it's just going back to what I said up here. So the Nephilim were on the earth both in those days and afterwards when the sons of God came to do this. So it's sort of saying the Nephilim were already there when these sons of God came down and started having.
Well, that would
sexual
mean
relations
they are
with
the
women.
Nephilim.
Well, if the
sons of
Nephilim
God.
are already there, then they can't be the things that were born from the.
Well, who are the sons of God then?
I tend to think it was angels that took on human form
Well, that would
and
not
had
be
sex
good.
with women, but I don't think that angelic sex with women produced offspring.
I don't know. I'm still so confused.
I think that the Nephilim are giant people who were like really strong, like giant.
The Nephilim were?
And so I'm not hard set on this because I don't even fully know. My current take is because of the way it's worded, I do think the sons of God were spiritual beings. But did they have children?
Bad.
And were the children
They were not
Nephilim?
good spiritual beings.
No, ma'am, because they were.
But
doing
they
stuff.
were different from the Nephilim.
See, that's also something people debate.
Yes, I don't know.
But they were definitely different than the Nephilim.
Why are
because
they
the Nephilim were
called the
separated
powerful
from the
men
sons
of
God.
old, the famous men? Why are they called that? Powerful, famous men, or mighty men of old.
So it seems like they knew of people that in their histories that they had that are lost to us now because as they got even older, those documents were lost. That just were incredibly famous and incredibly strong. People like Goliath, who were probably
And
the remnants.
Samson.
Well, Samson wasn't big and strong because he was big and strong. He was a normal dude that just had super strength, basically, from God
Right.
and His Spirit. Otherwise, we're saying
But
Samson
otherwise,
was a
the
Nephilim.
other one, these people that were born from the hybrids, like the angels and the
If we're going to go with that, yes.
the angels and the mortal women, then they were extremely famous for probably being strong, being a lot of stuff, probably being
Stuff
super
like that.
smart. They were probably, what is that? Like a super soldier.
Real quick, Nimrod in one of these lines is described as a famous man for being a hunter and being strong and things like that.
It's probably somewhere over here because
Is it?
I already wrote it.
Nimrod was one of Cain's sons, and they would have been wiped out after the flood.
Well, I wrote about them. I wrote down something, so it's probably in another passage that we're going to cover. Okay, so
Continue on. But just the final answer is there's a lot of questions about the Nephilim. What are they? What were the sons of God? I think the best answer is the sons of God were spiritual beings that came down and basically had sex with women in a sort of physical body that they took on, because you'd have to take on a physical body to have sex, and they were chained up for it. The New Testament mentions that for what they did, and the Nephilim are mentioned alongside them. And I don't fully know whether to connect the Nephilim as the offspring of those beings or whether they were just there. And then God realized the Nephilim have to just be taken, like everyone has to be taken out, but also specifically, if the Nephilim were being taken out, how did they survive? How did they continue
how did
on
they come back?
afterwards? How did they come
Why
back
did
later?
God let them come back?
Well, how did they come back is an interesting question because, like, how did they return in such a way that Goliath could, these are all questions I have that I need to look up too.
Okay.
But I don't think there are completely definitive answers because we just don't have enough of the knowledge
Everybody's
they
got
did.
their own opinions. Let's see. So I love the fact that it said Noah found favor with the Lord. Like nobody else did. So this man was righteous. Like I love that. Like it almost made me cry when I was reading it because I just want to find favor with the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's gonna make me cry again. And we know Noah walked with God like Enoch.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean that's another thing. Who wouldn't want that said about them? I would.
And still, they were sinners too because they were
Exactly.
living in a sinful world. You see, Noah sins after the flood by
Right.
getting drunk on wine.
Exactly. I mean, they weren't perfect. Nobody said they were perfect.
But they
we
walked
said
with the Lord.
They strived to be perfect. They walked with the Lord. They strived to please Him every day. I love that, first of all, the animals came to Noah. He didn't have to go out and find the ones God was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
God just said, you build the ark, and I'll bring the animals to you.
Mm-hmm.
That was pretty awesome. I think people don't realize that. I love the fact that the Bible tells us that Noah did everything God told him to do. So he didn't hesitate. He did everything that God told him to do. He didn't say, "Well, I'm not gonna do this part." Wasn't it like 200 years to build the ark? 100 years. Okay.
Well, it was. He gave him the instructions at 500 years of age, and then the flood happens at 600 when he's 600. So it kind of implies that it took him 100 years to build it.
Yeah.
It could have been he built the ark within a few decades, and then he had it sitting there waiting, but I don't think that's the case.
I remember it was 100 or 200 years, so yeah. It also said that God told Noah to take with them every kind of food that is eaten for him and his family and the animals.
Mm-hmm.
So he literally took on the ark every single kind of animal. I mean, every single kind of food there was on the planet.
No.
Yes.
All the kind of food that they would need to eat.
Yes, but that's what I'm saying. Everything that they eat, that they normally ate, they took something of everything. So.
And remember, everything.
They didn't have
they
just
were all
like
vegetables and fruits.
Yeah, they didn't have just like a few different things. He took one of everything that they normally ate. So.
And he'd have to take way more than just one of each vegetable or fruit.
That's what I'm saying. He took some of every single thing that God was producing at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty amazing.
And remember also that these are the kinds. It's according to their kinds.
Right.
So it's not according to every tiny little individual species. You could get tons and tons of different. I know.
As far as
and
the
fruits
food,
and vegetables.
I just think that was just something I hadn't read before. Like God said, take some of everything. So I like that.
Well, yeah, the animals have to eat. Mm-hmm. He has to eat, and his family, because they didn't eat.
But he wasn't saying like go pick your favorites. He said take it all. Like, but then I love the fact that God closed the door of the ark. So he brought the animals to the ark, and he closed everybody up. His hand was working through all of that.
It's pretty cool. It does say that. I was trying to look for it.
Now, the water was more than 20 feet higher than the mountains.
Mm-hmm. The mountains
and it surged for 150 days, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Before it started.
So here is a little thing that I was telling Alex that he had never thought about, and I don't think I had until I read through this time. He lands on Mount Ararat. All right. For our listeners, tell everybody where Mount Ararat is.
I believe it's Mount of Olives.
Mm-hmm. I think so, but where is it?
You're asking geography. I don't remember.
Yes, but isn't it in the same vicinity right there as where Noah was already living? It's over in the Middle East area.
Well, of course.
Okay. So what I was thinking about when I was reading this was, so for 150 days they're in there. Mm-hmm. They finally get to set foot out, and the ark is on the mountain of Ararat. Mm-hmm. It could have been anywhere in the world, but it's right back basically where it started. Is there some reason for that?
I think God was just keeping them in an area that they knew.
Yeah.
So that way, if he took them from the Middle East all the way to the North America, then they would be the geography. Well, the geography is also kind of messed up because there's no trees. They've all drowned out now. So there's.
But I mean, they probably did recognize the mountains. Ararat.
They would have recognized mountains.
And it wouldn't have been that big of a deal if he had moved them somewhere else, because like you said, there was nothing.
But temperature changes would have happened. Seasonal changes would have been different.
But I think it's because that's where it began, and God just continued it right there, because that is his people and that is his land. Mm-hmm. A lot of times we get the big head in America and think that it's all about us, and it has actually never been about us. We are the Gentiles.
Primarily about Israel.
Yes.
So actually, it's all primarily about God.
He didn't take the ark and go, I'm just going to put him all the way over here. He's like, you know what? I'm going to leave him. I'm going to bring him back, or I'm going to leave him. More than likely, he brought him back, because I'm sure the currents took him all over the world in 150 days, or wherever it took him. But he's like, I'm going to bring him back home. I'm going to bring him back to this land that I started humankind with. And I never thought about that until I read this time. I'm like, talking to Alex, and I'm like, you realize that he's right back where he started? Like, that is so wild. There's got to be a reason God did that. And I don't know, but I just think maybe it's because that's where he started. So, all right. So, it was the 7th month when the ark rested on the mountains. Oh, and when they get off, they're allowed to eat meat. I love that. But that means the animals are now not friendly to them. But while they
They
were
were
on the
afraid.
ark, they were friendly.
They weren't afraid on the
When
ark.
they were on the ark, they didn't have to worry about the lions eating them, tigers eating each other, whatever.
God brought them there. He's not
Exactly.
going to make it where they also eat each other.
But afterwards, he says they're going to be scared of you now. So be careful because
Which kind of sucks. I want to go pick up a squirrel sometimes and not get scared or bite me.
well, and you know, like the new earth, we're going to have animals that we can just walk up to in a line and stuff like that.
Like,
So
it
that's
takes
gonna be
us.
awesome.
It takes us doing tons of like generational domestication where we like turn a wolf into a dog before they'd even get near us. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, so Noah has 3 sons. Is Ham his youngest son?
So that's a good question. I looked at it too. I was trying to figure out who's the oldest, who's the youngest.
I think it does tell us who the oldest is. I think it's it does tell us, and I didn't write it down.
It's Shem, I believe.
But I think Ham is the youngest.
I don't know. It starts with mentioning.
I think Ham is the youngest and Shem is the oldest because when he curses Canaan, he says that Canaan will be Shem's slave.
Yeah, so Shem is actually the line that Abraham comes from.
Right.
So he's basically saying, and Canaan are where the Canaanites come from. I don't think Canaan was actually a slave to Shem. I think he's looking forward prophetically
Right.
to when the Canaanites become the Israelite slaves. Because that happens. The Canaanites become enslaved by the Israelites.
You are right. I didn't think about that.
And so it's about Israel again.
Yeah.
And it's about these chosen lines that God has. And so, yeah, it's just, he's looking forward, he's seeing the same issues that's going to continue throughout all of history, and they're going to continue to be at each other. Canaan's going to continue to be dishonorable to such a point where he becomes enslaved at some point.
And so that was the question that so many people on our message board or on Facebook, on our Reading Through the Bible group.
Just like his dad was dishonorable, Ham.
That's what we were saying. Why did he curse Canaan? And my theory was, what was that? My theory was because they were big on respect back then, especially like there is a commandment that says honor your father and mother, so God was even big on respect. And so for Ham to do what he did to Noah was so disrespectful. Like he should have done like his brothers and walked in backwards and covered him. Instead, he went out and talked about him and joked about it. I don't know if he joked, but you know what I mean. He went out and gossiping about it to his brothers.
To his brothers,
yeah,
and looked at
so
him.
disrespectful. Like, oh my gosh!
So.
I don't know that I would curse my grandson, but back in those days, maybe I would have.
Well, the curse isn't just like I cursed him, and so this is the way it's got to be now. The curse is like more of a prophetic announcement that you did this. Your issues are going to continue down your family, and your family is going to be enslaved to Shem someday. So,
your character is showing. Mm-hmm. You're gonna give your character to your son, and he's gonna be like you.
He's gonna choose to be just like this. This gonna be a family thing, basically. Right. And you see, it's true.
Yeah.
And so, and you also see, Japheth doesn't really get a big blessing.
Yeah.
He doesn't get a curse.
Isn't he like the middle child?
He's kind of like the middle child. Japheth gets to live in the tents of Shem.
So I'm guessing Shem is the oldest.
Shem, but...
And then Ham is the youngest.
He deals with Canaan, the youngest, first. And then he talks about Japheth, and then he talks about Shem.
Well, Canaan is Ham, the youngest son's son.
All right. But this is the same, like when... Never mind. We'll see later. God tends to reverse expectations with how Jacob gets the blessing instead of Esau and things like that. So there's lots of things.
So God tells Noah to build the ark when he's 500 years old, right?
Correct. And then 600 is the flood, and then they get off at 601.
Really?
When he's 601.
When he's 601?
Yes, ma'am. Alright. And then the last section, other than the Psalms and John,
Hold on. Let me finish my question. Alright, so of course, this is what I wrote about Nimrod, the powerful hunter, and also the king in Shinar.
Okay, you're right. So he was after. Alright.
And I just put down that Japheth's sons were all of that. Those tribes were in like the coasts and the islands. That's where they all kind of went to. And then Shem's sons were like mostly like Eastern Hill Country people.
Mm-hmm. So yes,
I found this very funny. Javan and Jira. How do you say that last name? I mean that name right there.
I can't even read that.
Jerah.
It's upside down.
Jerah.
Jerah?
Jerah. So Javan and Jerah are actually Ryan's brother and sister's name.
Oh, that's really cool.
Ryan's half-brother and sister are named Javan and Jerah. So I'm guessing their mother must have gotten it from Genesis.
And a cool point about the descendants of Shem, Shem, Japheth, and Canaan is Canaan takes over the promised land area, the future promised land. Right. And Shem's descendants from Abram have to go in there and take it back because, again, the Canaanites are really bad.
Yeah, true.
So his prophecy / curse came true.
And that was basically it. I just made a note about Abraham's father was Terah. Is that how you say it?
And so, yes, the section
and then
ends,
day 7 is our rest day.
Mm-hmm. The section ends with us getting introduced to Abram and Sarai, who are, through Shem's line, going to be the people that God chooses to create the Israelites from and to bring the Messiah through. He didn't choose them because they were specifically special in the way that like they've earned it being chosen. But they did, when it came to Noah walked with the Lord. When it came to Abram, God knew that Abram would at least be faithful enough to have been credited righteousness with him. So there's a lot of things going on there, but it's just amazing to see how God was working through all this. And I'm very thankful that he didn't just completely destroy us. Because we deserved it.
We did.
We still deserve it, but he's very patient and loving.
Still to this day. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be. I would just always have to be a terrible God and I would be a terrible police officer because I'd have just swapped us all out and said, you people are crazy. Or if I was a police officer, you know how they always say, stop! Don't run or stop. Like, they always run. I would just shoot them. Like, I would be a terrible police officer. I'd be like, shoot them in the leg. I bet you won't run from me anymore. And especially if you're like menopausal or whatever, like, I'd be like, you don't make me run. Like, I would just shoot them. And Alex was like, you probably would shoot them. I feel like I would not be a good cop. Especially like when you're PMSing, like, oh, you gonna make me run today? Alex is like, yeah, they don't need to give you a gun and a badge because you'd be like, nope, not gonna run today. I got a donut, not gonna put it down. I said for you to stop, so. Yeah. But anyway.
And so that's this week covered, and if you want to join us next week, it is Genesis 12 through 29 we're going to be going over.
And if you have any questions, like I have lots of questions, so I know y'all have to have some questions.
Put them in the comments below, as well as I will be going over my topics that I chose and thought about in my own solo video. So you can stay tuned for that one as well. But either way, have a great day. God bless you guys. Stay in your word.
Oh, and do not forget our contest. Go tell us your 3 all-time favorite TV shows, and I will put you in a drawing on Friday for this jewelry set. It is really pretty in person, and I will do a live on Friday and announce the winner. Okay?
See you, everyone.
Bye.